Good morning, everybody. How's it going? My name is Allison Dillard. I am a math professor, the author of Crush Math Now and Raise Your Math Grade, and a mom of three. And I am super excited to introduce today's guest, Alissa Daire Nelson. She's one of my favorite people in the world, and she's freaking awesome, okay? And here's the thing about today is that she's also freaking awesome because she believes that you are freaking awesome too, all right? And in the next 10 or 20 minutes, you're gonna really understand that, all right? So, Alissa Daire Nelson is regularly featured on television news segments inside major blogs and publications and on podcasts all over the globe. She's a success coach, a speaker, and the host of the Frickin Awesome Entrepreneur Podcast, as well as the new podcast, Making the List. She's the author of the book From Frustrated to Freaking Awesome, which is also one of my favorite book titles ever. And more than anything else, she is exceedingly proud wife and mother of two who loves helping others discover how to own their perfect lopsidedness and to learn to have it all. Welcome, Alissa. I'm so excited to have you here.
Allison, it's so exciting to be here. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to talk to you because you are one of my favorite people as well. And, hopefully to share some encouragement and some insight for the people who are watching as well.
Yes.
Well, watching and listening, I should
yes. Well, on the theme of freaking awesome, I think one of the freaking awesome things that you do is Strengthsfinders. All right. Yeah. And this was something that was really new to me. I didn't even know that this was a thing, and I found it so helpful. So could we just jump in and could you explain what Strengthsfinders are and why they're so freaking awesome?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a whole slew of profiles and assessments out there. Mm-hmm. Some of them are personality profiles. Some of them are let's put these four colors together and you can decide what color you are, which I think puts people into a box. If I'm one of four things, then how does that make me unique? And I'm so much deeper of a human being than just four things. And when I found the Strengthsfinder profile, which has now been renamed Clifton Strengths, but it will always be Strengthsfinder to me. Over 40 years of research had gone into it. Before I went into business coaching and success coaching, I was a dietitian first, and then I was a nurse. So evidence-based practice was really important to me, and really having the science behind it. So when 40 years of research went into this psychometric tool, which means that it's statistically reliable, it's repeatable, you can trust it. It doesn't matter what mood you're in, you're gonna get accurate results. That was really important to me. And I had such a deep limiting belief that everything was wrong with me, right? If anything ever went wrong, I always thought it was my fault, right? Mm-hmm. Like I wasn't perfect enough. I screwed this up. I did that, blah, 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 blah. And so I needed something that had such firm science behind it that it could start to crack that belief that everything was wrong with me. And for the first time, I was like, holy moly, this is proving to me that there are things that are right with me. And that, propelled another decade of personal development to really figure out how do I embrace this, and now how do I leverage those strengths. Yes. And so that's what Strengthsfinder is, and it's why I love it so much. There are others out there as well. But Strengthsfinder is definitely the language that I speak, and the one that I trust the most. They do, side note, since there are lots of parents watching this show as well and listening, there's a kids version as well called Strengths Explorer, and it's intended for kids that are 10 to 14. Okay. I had my girls take it when they were like 8 and 9. So as long as they have fairly good reading comprehension, you can actually have them take the kids version, which I think is also really, really helpful.
Oh, that sounds like lots of fun. I will have my oldest one check that out. I think it's actually really a perfect age to really start thinking about all that. But one of the things that we were talking about earlier was that a good way to sort of teach your children how to identify their strengths and embrace their own strengths, lean into those things, is to actually do that yourself.
Totally.
And especially through difficult times like right now. So, what are some ways that maybe parents can do that or benefit from that?
I think one of the most important things is some honest vulnerability with your kids. Yes, you are in a position of authority for your children, but it's okay for them to see you sad. It's okay for them to see you admit, gosh, I'm challenged today. I'm having a rough day today. Because what it does is it allows them to go, hey, I don't have to have my stuff together all the time perfectly too, right? So many of our kids fall into this perfectionism, and we bring home grades, right? The kids bring home their report cards, and they've got all A's and they've got a C. Where do we focus? We focus on the C. Well, what if we first praised all the A's and said what went well in those classes, right? So when we think about our own strengths and where we really thrive, right? And if we focus, what we focus on, we get more of. So if we're focusing on those really good things, we're going to get more of those good things. And then we're going to turn around and seek it out in our children. And so, obviously we can go down an entire rabbit hole of how do you identify and leverage your strengths. But the first thing is just noticing who and what you are and how you're reacting or how you want to react in a particular situation, and notice it without judgment. Because then you can actually go, well, that's interesting. Like, this happened and I got really mad. This happened and I feel totally drained. What else is behind that? Right. And when we can even verbally walk through that in front of our children, it allows them space to also go, you know what? I don't really want to do my homework right now. Why not? What's behind that? Oh, it's because I feel stupid when I sit down and I do, this, and this, or, this is just really boring to me. Is there another way? And now all of a sudden we have a whole new conversation,
Yes.
Where everybody is A, more honest, B, figuring out how to do things in a way that jazzes them up instead of just sucks them dry,
Yes.
which is really what leveraging strengths is all about.
Yes, and I love that it gets everything just a deeper level of conversation and understanding about whatever the problem is. And I think that comes up in math all the time, is that like, oh, I hate math and I don't want to do it. And it's not helpful when you never get beyond that, right? And there's
Right.
there's so many things underneath that, there's so many different, problems and causes and stuff like that. And so it's really helpful to actually think about, well, why is that? Why right now? Why this assignment? And let's talk about that instead of just do it,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know when I was a kid, actually really good at math, but I was never good at showing my math. And I know math is done completely different. My girls are 13 and 14 going into 8th grade and 9th grade. And so, I know that it's all done very much differently than when I was a kid. But my brain didn't work like how they taught. And so I could come up with the right answer, but I couldn't come up with it in a way that they liked. Right. And so it's like and so I would lose points on math tests for that. And so I figured out how to show them enough work.
Yes.
Like I would come up with my answer and be like, okay, now what is it that they want?
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I'm one of 7 children, number 6 in the bunch. So, it didn't get a lot of attention. It was kind of like, hey, go figure it out. Right. But it would have been awesome to sit down and have a conversation with my parents about like, well, this is how my brain works and how I'm getting this answer. How can we blend that so that I'm learning the rules and the methods that my math teachers are teaching, and also continuing to let my brain work like it works,
right? Right.
And it's just a different conversation, yes. I think, than certainly in the realm of what you and I grew up in, where our parents were just like, just do it.
Yes. And, I think that it is really helpful to sort of, try to think about and identify those things on your own. But one of the things that I found, incredibly helpful when I did the Strengthsfinder test with you was that some of the things that I thought were my biggest weaknesses were actually my strengths. And the way that you talked to me about that really helped me to see that and actually approach them in a different way that really just eliminated so much stress for me. So
Yeah.
I don't know, can you talk about that a tiny bit in terms of like how sometimes people maybe misidentify their strengths and weaknesses and how that can just sort of add stress?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, along with that stress is the guilt and shame of why am I
Mm-hmm.
not like somebody else? Why
Yes.
am I not like, like I wish I could just be like somebody else. And the thing is that when we feel that way about ourselves, we just naturally teach that to our children.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
we don't want our children to grow up thinking that everything is wrong with them,
Right,
right?
right.
So I think it's really important to first figure it out for you,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can live and breathe what you want to live and breathe into your children. So what's interesting is that every strength has needs like humans need oxygen. So in the Strengthsfinder profile, there are 34 identified themes. So, there's a lot of different needs there. And so what I need is actually different than what you need. So my oxygen is different than your oxygen.
Yes.
But if you think about it, if you put your head underwater, you could survive for a short period of time, right? But you're not going to be thriving, right? You're not going to be at your
Mm-hmm.
very best.
Mm-hmm.
And there comes a point after a minute and 15 seconds, maybe a minute and a half, right? Where your body runs out of oxygen. And what you do is you kick, you claw, you thrash, you do whatever you can do to get your head above water, right? So in the real world here, our behavior comes out sideways, right? So if you're thinking about this pool metaphor or this swimming metaphor, right? And you look over and someone is kicking and thrashing, you're like, what the heck is going on with that person? Like, what's wrong with them, right? But in reality, they're just not getting their needs met. They actually need help, like give them
Right.
some oxygen.
Right.
So when we can start to discover what is the oxygen that I need, what is it that puts air in my lungs, now we can and that's really what self-care is, right? Like massages are great, but the fact of the matter is that our strengths have needs. And I'll give you an example. Just from my strength themes. So my number one strength theme is futuristic. So one of the gifts or the contributions that brings is that I can paint the future, right, and decloud the future. That's one of the things that I bring to my clients, is like helping them to clear the path so that they can see where they're going, right? But the thing is that it also needs space and time to daydream.
Yes.
And if I am so in the weeds of my business or in the weeds of my day to day, and I don't give myself a little bit of time to daydream about what could be, I begin to feel stuck. I begin to feel like the oxygen is being pulled out of the room. So when you begin to understand what you need, now there's the self-care, right?
Yes.
So I do visualization in the morning. I do meditation in the morning, and I let my mind wander. That's part of my morning self-care routine so that I can thrive throughout the day. And the StrengthsFinder profile certainly helps in identifying those things, but you can also identify it just by being mindful and noticing, like, what
Mm-hmm.
gives me energy? What makes me feel excited? And then do more of that.
Yes. Yes. And I think, I was on the StrengthsFinder one that I did. Also, I was futuristic as well. And then the other one that I found so fascinating was that I also fell into the learner category. In that I'm always needing to learn. And it was so interesting, I think, not just learning that, but learning what you'd shared to me about that in terms of integrating that into your self-care. Because I think I
Yeah.
had always thought of both learning and both the futuristic side, planning for the future, I always saw that as procrastinating. And I was always beating myself up for it because I would always want to like take these, classes. Like, I had just this last year, I had signed up for like Toastmasters. I was doing that on like Tuesday night over last winter break. I had signed up for just to get this like random teaching certificate to teach online. No idea that any of this stuff was coming. No reason for it. I didn't have any sort of online teaching lined up in the future, but I thought it was interesting, but then, after the fact that, I'd spend all this time doing these things and then I would just be like, why am I doing it? It seems like a waste of time. It seems sort of frivolous. But after really talking with you, I realized that like this learning aspect is just, it's something that's a part of me. And it's actually my self-care, and so often I'd be like, I need to go get a pedicure and I need to go get a massage to relax. But really that stuff just added another to do to my list that stressed me out. But sort of leaning into this learning side, or taking that time to just sort of reflect and plan. I feel like I've got the whole fall semester sort of, mentally kind of planned out in my head. And I feel so much better about that, because I know that that's something that I just need for myself in order to feel better.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's important is we tend to think that the things that make us feel so good are luxuries, right? And like, well, that'll be the reward for the end, right? When really, like, we don't say it to somebody who's running a marathon. At the end of your marathon, we'll give you your oxygen tank, like, and you're going to be just fine. That's a part of the process in order to be able to get through this marathon. And so recognizing that it's something that feeds your soul, literally and figuratively, allows you space to be like, you know what, I am going to sit and just read a book for 4 hours. Like rather than go to the spa.
Yes.
Right. And what's interesting is it doesn't always correlate to spending money, right? When you actually fill your needs.
Oh, absolutely.
It actually sometimes is far less expensive, because you're not doing the things that, like the people who are out there marketing are telling you to go spend your money on. You're doing the things that actually feed your soul. And so something that's interesting that you mentioned with regards to the learner, right? Learner loves the process of learning. It doesn't always even care about the outcome of the learning. It loves the process of learning, which also learners tend to also be teachers, because it then loves the process of helping other people learn as well, right? And it was something important to understand about how strengths become strengths, true strengths, right? So there's strength themes or talents, but they don't become strengths until they are giving you energy and they're giving energy to others.
And that's one of the things that I think you help people do so well, because I feel like I could have taken the Strengthsfinder test and seen it and been like, okay, you say that these things are strengths. I don't necessarily feel that way. And in all honesty, I don't know that I would have known what to do and how to flip that around to lean into those strengths. So I guess, thank you, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is that you really helped me for that.
It's so interesting, right? Because people who have been taught all of our lives, and I was one of them, right? Fix your weaknesses, fix your weaknesses, fix your weaknesses. Like, well, if I focus on my strengths, like, am I just ignoring these things over here that are my weaknesses? And what's interesting is 2/3 of our weaknesses are based in our strengths. So the most common type of weakness is an overuse of our strengths, right? When you don't know what you don't know, you just keep using the tools that are in your tool belt. So if all you got is a hammer, right, and it's right there, everything is a nail, right? So you just keep using those strengths, and it's maybe not serving you. I do have a lot of clients that have learner, and they just keep taking certifications, right? And they forget to go work their business because they're busy taking certifications. And so it's like, okay, is it now serving you?
Right.
Is it now serving you?
For that specific thing, I think I found that as well. Like I found that balance of realizing that the learner aspect is self-care for me, but you can't do that all the time. If that's all that I do, then I don't actually have a business. And so you're right. It's recognizing what role that plays in your life so you can use it usefully, not overuse it and not fight against it. But there's a nice balance,
Yeah, that's right. And that's why you have to really tune in, and not just tune into you. Like, oh, this is giving me energy, because you could probably learn 16 hours a day, Allison.
Oh, yeah.
And feel like, this is amazing.
It's true. But, I go to these conferences.
Like, your kids are like, Mom, can we have some food? Like, could we go outside and play? Like, can we do some other things? Right. So it's serving you, but it's not serving others.
Yes.
Right. And so just understanding that and being aware of, is this still serving me? Is it still serving others?
Yes.
That's the point at which it really becomes a strength. And so I think that's an important thing to recognize. It's not that we just do these things and turn the proverbial radio up until the speakers blow and like your rear view mirrors are rattling, right? But it's like, when is it music and it's fun and it gives you energy. And when is the point where, people are honking at you and going, you're shaking my rear view mirrors because your music's so loud, turn your music down, right? And I think that's so important. And when we pay attention, this is where I think it really translates into parenting, right? When we pay attention to what we need, we give our children to permission to pay attention to what they need, yes. Right? And this is what I always tell my clients this. And yes, I'm a success coach, but we talk about all the things because all the things are important, mm-hmm. Right?
They all relate back.
Is that our jobs as parents isn't to raise good kids. Our jobs as parents is to raise great adults. And so the things that we're working through as in our 30s and 40s and beyond, because we didn't know how to deal with them as children, right? How much more can we serve our children by teaching them some of the skills that we figured out at 30 and 40 and whatever, like our strengths, yes. And leveraging our strengths? How can we teach them to be better adults? Yes. How can we empower them to have more responsibility over their education and how their education looks, even though they're in the parameters of school, right? Right. To speak up for themselves, to advocate for themselves, to go and talk to the teacher about this question instead of having you go to bat for them. Right. Like those are really important life skills. And so, that's how I've and it's partially my futuristic because I'm always seeing my kids as adults.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. But it's like, how can I use this situation to empower them to be stronger and more effective, interdependent adults?
Yes.
Right. And we could get into a whole thing about independence versus other things because we're taught to be independent, right. Which is not actually how humans work, right? We work in interdependence. So anyway, but that's a whole nother thing. So I just think that, but we cannot teach those things until we focus on ourselves. So it comes back to that self-care, comes back to our own personal development. How am I being my best me to be the example of what a great adult looks like?
Yes. And another thing too, I think that honestly really helps with mom guilt, because I think there's just a lot of guilt about taking time for yourself to do what you need to do, your own self-care, to think about what will help you get through all the difficulties that parents are facing with right now. But when you frame it in that context of you are teaching your children how to be adults, right? That for those moms who are really just feeling guilty about doing anything for themselves, hopefully that can help them to sort of, not just think about their strengths, but to think about themselves and their needs, during these difficult times. Because honestly, that's something that you can do for your kids. If you're the mom who needs to frame everything in terms of, is it good for my kids? Yes, your self-care is good for your kids and it's good for them going into adulthood.
And in this day and age with COVID and everything that we're dealing with right now, so many people are working from home, and certainly not everybody. And a special thank you to all of our healthcare workers who are literally on our front lines, our grocery store workers, our USPS delivery folks, et cetera, right? There are a lot of people that are going to work, but many people are working from home. And so your kids get to see you work even more now than they ever have. Mm-hmm. I just had this conversation yesterday afternoon with a client who was just about in tears because she's like, yesterday I told my kids all day long, I got to get in the office and work. I got to get in the office and work. I got to get in the office and work. And she never did. But what her kids heard all day was mom's working, mom's working, mom's working, mom's working. So she literally got no work done. And her kids felt like she was working all day. And so, this is where we had this really deep conversation because I was like, okay, knock that off. She's like, what? And I was like, all right, we got to set boundaries here so that your kids know, in order for me to be my best for you, I need you to go take care of yourselves and manage yourselves for 2 or 3 hours. And our kids are of the age that they can do that, right? And therefore you can then leave the office and actually spend time with them.
Right.
So
Right.
counterintuitively, going and doing work and locking them out of your office and putting a sign on the door that says, unless there's blood, like, don't bother me, right? That you're actually doing what's best for your kids and being there the most for your kids. And at home, it's just this big, giant gray blur of work-life separation. But that makes those boundaries that much more important. And boundaries are something that are so important for kids. If you have daughters, right, teaching them boundaries and how to say no, and all of those things.
Yes.
I have two daughters, so that's something that's very pertinent in my mind. And they're getting to an age where they're beginning to be interested in boys and whatever. And I'm like, okay, here's the deal: like consent and boundaries, and all of those things.
Yeah, all the things.
And so it's like, by setting boundaries yourself, you're showing them that, oh, you know what, it's okay to do that. I don't have to always be at the whim of other people.
Yes.
Nor should I abuse other people's boundaries.
Right. Absolutely.
So anyway, I think that's even more important, those expectations and communication and boundaries in this day and age, with COVID being just messing with our lives.
Right. And even going back, it relates back to the futuristic thing of them as adults, right? If you're overwhelmed and not getting the work done, and they think that you are getting, just whatever that overwhelming situation is as a parent, right? If you can find a way beyond that, right, to do what you need, then you're teaching your kids how you're raising someone who will grow up to find those boundaries, right, in adulthood too. Because if you're the overwhelmed mom who isn't getting work done, and she's not there for her kids, but she's trying to do both at the same time, and she's overwhelmed and doesn't have boundaries, that's what you're raising your kids to do as well. And so even though it's harder right now, and you might feel guilty about it right now, you want your kids to grow up to be the mom who's got the boundaries and says, this is what I need to do now, and this is what I don't need, and by doing that now, you're raising kids who will have the power to do that in adulthood.
That's right. It's all about that empowerment to just go, I think that I can do something more, right?
Yes.
And this client yesterday, her boys are 8 and 11, and I was like, okay, so tell me about what your boys are capable of. And she's like, well, I'm always picking up after him. I'm like, is that necessary? Like, you're breaking from work, from what you're doing to put food on the table,
right,
to pick up after them. Is that serving them? And she's like, oh my gosh, no, it's not. But the messy kitchen counter drives me crazy. I was like, all right, let the messy kitchen counter drive you crazy and hold them accountable. And she's like, oh yeah, right. Like, and so it's just one of those things that we get into this routine of serving our kids and wanting to make sure that we're there for our kids, and yet sometimes we're actually disempowering them.
Right. Oh, that's such good advice. Let's see, Alyssa, gosh, we're about out of time already. But if somebody wants to find out more, and there was another question I was going to ask you. It was about your Frickin Awesome process. But if anybody wants to follow up with you to learn about that, or about Strengthsfinders, or your success coaching, parent coaching, all the Frickin Awesome things that you do, where can they learn more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go right to my website. That's the best place to find me. It's dare2succeed.com, and Dare is spelled like my middle name, which is DAIRE, and it's the number 2, succeed.com. And often people are misspelled succeed too. It's 2 C's and 2 E's. So DAIRE, the number 2, succeed.com. And there's a contact form there too. So you can contact me directly on the website and see all the things that I offer, and have a link to my book, and all of those other things. So it's all kind of centrally focused right there on the website.
Perfect. And I will leave the link in the comments also. That way it's easy to find. So definitely check that out. And honestly, find out your strengths and lean into them during this difficult time. It is the best form of self-care that I've found. up there with the Miracle Morning, honestly. It's very specific
you're not
to you.
everything, but you are some things. And when you can really embrace that, number one, it allows you to really lean into that and bring that fully to the table.
Yes.
And it allows you to let other people off the hook and bring their own strengths, right?
Yes.
Now you're not expecting people to show up like you because you go, oh, I have unique strengths. They must too.
They do also.
Now, how can we come together and, do a 1 + 1 = 11, which I know is not real math, but like it multiplies, right? When you bring your strengths all to the table with others.
There we go. That's the end of our math episode today is 1 + 1 = 11. All right. On that note, I will see you next time. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Alissa.